Hello and welcome to podcast 3 in our evolution series. In the last one, we looked at evidence for natural selection, the process by which species change over time. We talked about artificial selection, what happens when humans select organisms and allow them to either breed or not. We looked at an example of natural selection in terms of the finch beaks of the Galapagos finches. This time what we're doing is we're looking at evidence for evolution itself, meaning evidence we have that species have in fact changed over time, not necessarily how that change took place. That was our last podcast. And it's going to be a series of 5 short podcasts where we just look at the evidence that tells us, yes, life has changed over time. Okay, so our evidence that we have that evolution has indeed occurred comes from 5 major areas. Now, it's important to understand that this is not just coming from one area of science. It's coming from 5 different areas, and we weave all these together to make this enormous mountain of evidence that evolution has occurred. No one of these stands alone. Okay, these 5 areas are biogeography, which is the one we will talk about first, the fossil record itself, comparative anatomy, comparing the actual structures of different organisms, comparative embryology, comparing the development of different organisms, and the molecular biology that literally looks at the genes of different organisms and determines how related they are. Okay, so biogeography. What is biogeography? It is simply the geographical distribution of species across the planet. Where are different species found across the earth? Okay, so that's biogeography. Now, how is that evidence for evolution? Well, let's make some hypotheses, okay? Here's a hypothesis. Think about, how would you expect different species to be distributed on the planet if evolution had not occurred? If each species had just been placed where it is now 6,000 years ago, okay? And the answer to that is there would be really no reason to expect relatedness between species of neighboring regions. If they had just been plopped there, we wouldn't really expect there to be any relationship between them. A species that lived here in Richmond, Virginia would have really no reason to be more closely related to one, say, from Norfolk than a species from Thailand. Okay, if evolution had not occurred. The alternate to that is to think about, how would you expect different species to be distributed if they had evolved from a common ancestor? Okay, so, and if species were distributed according to an evolutionary history, then just like with family members, you would expect more closely related species, more closely related family members, species to exist kind of near each other. In that scenario, then you would expect a species that lived here in Richmond to perhaps be more closely related to a species in Norfolk than one in Thailand, okay? Because they would have originated one from the other, just like a family member. Children are more closely related to their parents and live near them, okay, than a stranger that lives completely somewhere else. So if you observe biogeography, what do you actually find? Do you find no relationships distributed geographically, or do you find relationships? And the answer to that question is very definitely more closely related species are distributed closer to each other than more distantly related species. There is, in fact, a correlation, a relationship between where species are distributed and how related they are, okay? So here's an example. Tropical animals in a tropical jungle environment on South America are more closely related to species found in a South American desert, okay, than they are to any other species, okay? Why isn't this similarity of genes simply unrelated to their location? Why aren't they just kind of just as closely related to South American desert animals as they are to African animals, for example? Why aren't they more closely related, in fact, to other tropical animals, say from a tropical region in Africa? Then environments are certainly more similar there, and the organisms often share similar traits to help them cope with those tropical environments as opposed to a very different desert environment. Okay, another example. Species on the Galapagos Islands off the coast of South America are much more closely related to mainland South American species than to species from similar types of islands around the world. If evolution were not the case, then why do these organisms that live near each other also show closer relatedness? Okay. General observations about something called island biogeography. A lot has been done with looking at the distribution of organisms on islands in particular, because islands have lots of unique species that are typically native to the island itself and nowhere else. However, what we always find when we examine these isolated island species is that they are always more closely related to species of the nearest mainland area or to a neighboring island. Why would that be? It only makes sense if ancestors from a nearby mainland area or a nearby island colonized this island and then diversified and became slightly different, so maybe they don't look so similar anymore. It's the only thing that makes sense is an evolutionary history for these animals, okay, or plants. Another example, why are marsupials the dominant mammal on Australia, the continent of Australia, and nowhere else, okay? Nowhere else do you find marsupials as the main mammal. Is Australia just inherently inhospitable to placental mammals? The answer, of course, is no. In fact, anywhere that placental mammals have been introduced on Australia, anytime they have been introduced, they have exploded in numbers there. They do very, very well and actually tend to outcompete the marsupials that are present. So the answer is that the unique Australian fauna, animal life, the marsupials there, evolved on that continent to be as they are today because it was simply isolated from places where placental mammals arose. If Australia's geography had been different, if it had been closer to some mainland where placental mammals could get to Australia, the fauna there would almost certainly look like it looks everywhere else, with placental mammals being the dominant form. Again, the only explanation for this is this evolutionary, this isolation of this group from other mammals. So the biogeographical patterns that we observe in the real world really don't make sense if species were individually placed in suitable environments by whatever force. The patterns do make sense if we find modern species where they are because they evolved from ancestors that once inhabited those regions or somewhere close by some time ago. That's the only reason these relationships based on location make sense, okay? So that's one prong of the evidence for evolution having occurred, is the placement of where we find animals and plants around the globe and how related they are in those areas, okay? So that's evidence block number one. This will be followed by evidence, fossil evidence for evolution, okay? So thank you for watching. Catch you in the next podcast. Take care.